What is up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Breathe and Air podcast, where everyday action meets extraordinary mindset. Today we have author, podcaster, speaker, a friend of mine, and the world's best courage coach, Mr. Laban Ditchburn. Welcome, brother.
It's good to be here, brother. Breathing air with
That's
my
right.
man, Mason Benego. Thanks for having me, bro. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, as you guys can see, if you're watching on video, I very much matched my guest attire today. Felt only right to match the energy. I want to hear the story about how this came about. Where did this come about? Because this is Laban Ditchburn to a T.
Well, mate, first things first, I hope you are watching this if you are listening to this. Mason looks damn good. He pulls this off. I think you should keep this, right? The reason that this thing ended up, my wife and I fled the tyranny of lockdown from Melbourne, Australia in 2020, into 2021. And we got out when the lockdowns were still in place and we had to get special permits to leave the country. That's a whole nother story. But we ended up in the only free place in the world at the time, which was Mexico. We're in Playa del Carmen on the Caribbean coast, which is a 45-minute drive from Cancun. I know you know the area well. You were just down here, right?
I was.
But the climate, it's like the official climate is like hotter than a camel's ass. and it's like 80 degrees and 90 humidity the whole time. So when I'm with the air conditioning going in the background, if you've got anything more than this jacket on, like you are sweating profusely. And I just sort of got away with it and no one pulled me up on it. And I was like, hey, this is kind of cool. And it's just become a look. So that's the true story.
In Mexico, no one's going to say anything. You're on Mexico time.
But you're lucky if I'm wearing a shirt. Like,
Yeah.
Maybe if we're going out for dinner somewhere nice, I'll put on a shirt. Or if we've got to go to a big shopping mall, they kind of want you to have a tank top on or something. But like, why would you? We're this paradise here.
Yeah, you're not going to go full Liver King mode where you just walk around, just carrying a rack of weights on your back.
I'm full natty. So there's the difference between me and Liver
Full
King.
natty.
Yeah, the Liver King. Man, that pissed me off. I'll be honest.
Yeah, I mean, for someone that's like loves that, fitness industry and been around it for a while, like I had my fair assumptions just because the way his abs are, like anytime anyone takes HGH testosterone, like not only do your muscles grow, but your organs grow as well. And usually you get like a beer gut or you get some type of gut with abs. And he has like that protruding gut with abs because HGH, your organs are going to grow too, buddy.
I didn't know your organs grew as well, dude. That can't be good.
Yes, it's crazy. Yeah.
Well, the thing with Liver King, we don't need to focus on this too much, but I used an animal-based diet to heal a whole litany of mental and physical issues, right? I'm a huge proponent of the carnivore diet, and I follow a pretty carnivorous diet. It's probably more dirty carnivore than anything now. And man, maybe I'll be wrong about this, but I believe there's so much bullshit being spewed forth in the world that like humans are craving the truth more than ever. And it's like, who cares if you were open? Yeah, I'm on the juice course saying, look at the size of me. But here's what I'm also eating to optimize health. And then that way he would have absolutely crushed it, in my opinion.
Yes.
That's the issue that I have with it. I forgive the guy. Don't know him. I'd absolutely go up and shake his hand and have him on as a guest of the podcast. And I'd talk to him about it. I'd say anything like this to his face. But I was just like... And I think he knows he made a big mistake because he's absolutely dropped off a cliff from a social media presence point of view. Certainly from my experience. Don't know about you, Mason.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad because it's an easy thing to come out and say. And maybe not an easy thing, but you should say it, especially when you're promoting a product that directly correlates and is sold off the way that you look. And the thing is people that actually have researched him, the 9 tenets are good things. Like a lot of the things that he talks about are very good and healthy things for people. And I'm sure he's affected a lot of lives for the better, but it's just tarnishing. It just shows you that you got to be super careful with what you put out there, and you got to stay true to your word, and you got to have integrity, because now everybody will remember that.
Bingo.
Not all the other good things.
This is one of the challenges I had around despised cycling competitive cycling after the whole Lance Armstrong thing, and they're like, oh, he raised all this money for things. It's just like, yeah, but it's all based on a foundation of bullshit. It's like, what else could he have achieved if he wasn't doing that? If they want to have a competition where they just make it legal, just like let it happen. Like, it's like a huge elephant in the room. I don't want to sound like I'm jumping on here and whinging, because I'm really grateful for like everything I have in my life. But these are just my whole philosophy in life, Mason. Is I just want to know the truth so I can make an informed decision, right? Like, and I'm not arrogant enough to ever believe that I think that I know it all. And I know I don't. In fact, the more I learn about the world, the more I figure out I know nothing about it, right? And so I've come to really be repulsed by lying, and especially when I can understand mistruth when you're trying to protect yourself, or you know, if you're a Jew in World War II and some Gestapo comes up and says, "Are you Jewish?" You're like, "No way, no way, bro." Nope. You do what you got to do, but like there's just lying has just become so widely accepted, and I want to break that narrative. I want to set an example of truth and honesty and vulnerability, because what people think of me is none of my business, right? Yeah. I mean, it's a constant battle with the ego, I think, too. And it's like, you want to care, but you really shouldn't care about what people think about you. And so much subconsciously of what we do, the way we act, is driven by what we think other people will think, how we'll be perceived, what our parents will think, what our peers will think, you know, and even subconscious beliefs and patterns that we don't even realize we're acting from. And that's the scary part for me. I was like, how many people are living in this state of trying to make other people happy or live someone else's dream, and they don't even realize that they're doing it? That's the scary part to me, because it's like, dang, you're ignorant to the fact that you're not even living true to yourself. Amen, bro. Amen. It's just like, this is the transformational growth journey that I've been through. The majority of my life was spent as a people pleaser, and I would use self-deprecating humor to try and make people laugh and make people feel happy. All the while, like, denigrating myself and belittling myself and negative self-talking myself. Like, now I don't, and I'm like having a way better existence on this planet. I can assure you that much. Yeah.
You've had quite the story. I want to kind of dive into, you know, the transformation that you've had physically, mentally, you know, just your life in general. But I want to start at a point for you where, you know, you were at a darker place in your life and you had an interaction with two queens. You talk about this a little bit in your book, but go ahead and tell us about the two queens, because I'm really interested here.
Well, this is the first chapter of the book, right? So, spoiler alert, stop listening for 3 minutes if you're going to listen to it or watch, or you can listen to it in my voice. I've been told it's the best way to consume it, right? This is a trailer. So this was an event that happened in the mid-noughties, about 2005, 6. And some friends were in town from New Zealand. I was living in Melbourne, Australia at the time. And we had drinks at home, and we were all binge alcoholics. Reflecting back, we were all alcoholics, for sure. High functioning, all had jobs, all kept our jobs. Paid taxes, you know, played sport on the weekend, but we were pissheads. And by the time we got to the strip club, we were hammered. And the natural progression from getting hammered was like getting something to keep you going longer, because you didn't want it to stop. And I bumped into a Native American guy legitimately in the men's urinal and said "how" to him. Like, it's the only thing I knew about it. And what he was doing in the bathroom, I have no idea, in Australia. And I bought what was some very powerful MDMA, and for me and my friends, and consumed that and ended up off my head. For those who haven't ever had ecstasy before, it's kind of like winning the lotto, falling in love with everyone that you meet, and having a non-ejaculatory orgasm all at the same time, right? Now, I'm not encouraging you to go and do it, because the come down the next day is like you want to Kurt Cobain yourself, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, off my head, I end up blowing all of my money on lap dances. And there was these amazing Eastern European twins, and Double in Trouble, they called themselves, to protect anonymity. And they propositioned me. They said, you can take us home for $2,000. And I said, I can't afford $2,000. They said, well, $1,600. And I was like, yes, give me half an hour. Now, I'd spent all my money. I'd blown $1,000 at this point. I knew I had $800 left in my bank account, and that once the ATMs or once your bank account hit midnight in Australia, same maybe in the US, it would give you access to your daily limit again. And the Crown Casino was just up the road, Kerry Becker's casino, and I went straight to the high rollers room, withdrew the $800 and put it all on one hand at the blackjack table, because if I double that bet, I'd have $1,600, right? I was going to have this hedonistic night. Now, I was a fat bastard back then, completely incompetent with women. So the idea of going home with these two 10s, or at least they were 10s in my head because I was high on pills and alcohol, was pretty enticing. And I drew a queen, and the dealer, if you know how to play blackjack, had a queen as the first card, and the second card was hidden. And then I got a second queen. And had I had more money, I would have doubled it, or I would have split them. But I didn't. And I was like yelling with excitement. I was like, yes! And then the dealer pulled an ace and pulled a blackjack, and I lost everything. So I lost $1,600 in one night. I think I had to walk home. I had no money for a cab. And of course, I never got to sleep with the high-class escorts.
Yeah. And the reason why I asked this is because at that low point in your life, like, was this one of the catalysts for change, or was it just something that, was a checkbox in the hedonistic lifestyle that was going on in your life currently?
It's an interesting question, because I really, when I reflect back at a lot of these experiences that I had, and some people would say, Laban, you lived such an eclectic life. It was cumulative. Because that was in 2005. When I reached out for help was a decade later. But I think when you have enough of these shitty experiences, and you're getting older, and you're not achieving what you hoped you were going to achieve, you're kind of like, oh man, this formula of life I'm abiding by ain't working, and that's probably a more realistic explanation.
I've heard you discuss about the fact that you didn't necessarily have a full-on addiction where you had to go through steps and these kind of things. But for some people, do you think it's worse for them to be in this middle ground of, like you said, functioning alcoholism, or, doing these things, not really living up to their potential, being in that gray area versus really hitting a rock bottom?
150%. Because you don't think that there's anything wrong. You could interview all of my former circle of friends, and I say former because we've just got nothing in common anymore, right? I would argue all of them would say that they don't have a problem with alcohol. Men in their early 40s, late 30s, early 40s, mid 40s, some older, maybe they would now. But it's very easy until you are in the gutter, or you're being resuscitated at the hospital, to go, okay, all right, fair enough. And then you get intervened by a family. Most of these guys, myself included, never had an intervention like that. So it's easy just to bury your head in the sand and go, good, I got a job, I pay taxes. One of my old housemates, who shall remain nameless, would go Thursday till Sunday, non-stop, for months on end. Had a high-paid job, really well-paid job, and he would never miss a day sick. And he would come home from work on Monday, and you wouldn't see him until Wednesday. Like, he would just come straight home, go to bed, sleep, go to work, sleep, and then Wednesday start poking his head, and then Thursday's back into it again. Nightmare of a guy to live with. Completely off his head over the weekend, Thursday through Sunday. And had a death wish, because everyone else in his family had died below 60. So he's like, I'm going to die below 60 anyway, so I might as well just have a crack at it. What a horrendous existence for that poor bugger. So from my own experience, like, this is why I do what I do now, because people don't need to suffer immeasurably like I do. They don't need to do another decade of doing really idiotic things. 99% of all the stupid stuff that I ever did in my life was when I was drunk or high. And, thankfully dodged so many bullets where I could have been in jail, dead, who knows what might have happened. So I think that's the thing. Like, at least if you hit rock bottom, then you can kind of go, okay, maybe I need help now.
Yeah. I feel like if you're living that lifestyle for long enough, you're going to have those stories and those moments where you're like, wow, that was a close one, or wow, I am in jail, or wow, so I was drunk driving and hurt somebody else, or, something along those lines. It's just a matter of, statistics at that point. When you put yourself in harm's way that much.
Oh, dude. 1997, I was driving my father's Triumph TC 2500. I know you don't get too many of those in the US, but it's a British-designed tank of a car. 2.5 litre, 2500cc, and we were hammered to go get KFC at about 1 a.m. on a Saturday night. And I was being an idiot, and I had 4 passengers, and I was driving fast. That car was like a 1971, no ABS, no airbags. And I hit a parked 1981 Ford Laser, and thankfully no one was killed or severely injured. There was a few bumps and bruises. The irony, KFC was shut because there was no cell phones that could access the internet and see whether, or Uber Eats back then. But I dodged a massive bullet there, man. Like, I could have easily accidentally killed someone. If someone had been in the car that I hit, they'd absolutely be dead. You know what I mean? And there's lots of those stories of not just from me, but my circle of influence. And some people that weren't so lucky. A friend of mine, whose younger brother, was killed by a train when he was drunk. Other people ended up in jail. Dodged a few bullets there. But I got guardian angels, Mason. I got a lot of them, and they've been kept busy, yo.
Amen. What brought you to America, and what was that transition like?
Long before the lockdowns, on my vision board had been to come to the US. I knew that from 2018 that I wanted to be a speaker, and that manifested itself when the lockdowns happened. And so I knew that's where the majority of the professional and personal development space was based. That's where all the people that inspired me lived, or pretty close to it. And growing up, I'm from New Zealand, but I'm half Australian, half New Zealand. I spent 20 years in New Zealand, 20 years in Australia. There's a scene there for the space, but it's capped. There's only 25 million people in Australia. So getting to the US was a no-brainer. And those who may not be aware, Americans love my accent. Use your strengths, right? I'm not a bachelor level model. I'm not a Clio magazine or Men's Health just yet. But my charisma and my Australian accent, my New Zealand accent, allow me to get away with bloody murder. In fact, one particular incident when we were in the States last year, we were driving from Florida to Atlanta, and we were driving through Alabama. And we had a rental car, and we'd come from Arizona, so you can do 100 mile an hour in Arizona, no worries, no one bats an eyelid. I'm doing 105 on the freeway there, and I get pulled over by the highway patrol in Alabama, and I'm thinking, oh man, I'm cooked. And so I put on my thickest Australian accent, and the officer was almost apologetic for having to give me a fine, but he waved 20 mile an hour off the ticket, which stopped the car being impounded.
I was about to say,
right. Yeah. And I was a couple $100 fine, and I was just like, oh my God, Father! Imagine if I wasn't a charismatic New Zealand Australian. G'day, mate. Everything okay? How you? You're driving a little too fast. You understand me, boy? It's like something out of the Dukes of Hazzard. It was cool.
I thought it was either going to go really good for you or really bad.
I want you to squeal like a pig. Oh, God.
That's hilarious. So you said you kind of had these aspirations to become a speaker at a younger age, but what were some other aspirations growing up? Like, what was the young, rambunctious Laban like?
Dude, I knew what I wanted to do when I was 16. I knew it. My father is a retired radio announcer. He was a damn good one too. Never fulfilled his true potential, but he's still, in New Zealand, was one of the best ever. Holds a record that will never be beaten. And had a beautiful, beautiful radio voice, which I inherited a lot of his ability to communicate, definitely, for sure. My mother's a nutcase, outgoing, super extrovert as well. I love them both dearly, right? But I went to Dad. I was like, Dad, I'm going to do radio just like you. And he dissuaded me from it. He said, son, there's no money in radio. Why don't you get a proper job? So, like, I had everything filled out. I was going to go to the equivalent of, like, community college, or they call it Polytech in New Zealand, because it wasn't a college degree back then, and spent the next 20 years of my life blindly floundering through corporate life, doing jobs that I absolutely, in hindsight, despised, and was okay at them through sheer will. But this is one of the great messages that I love sharing with people. Like, the moment that you figure out why you are here on planet Earth, which is what I help people do, right? You will never, ever have to work again. And I know you might have heard this as a cliche. I promise you, it's true. Because you'll do it. You love doing it. It's like, it doesn't feel like work, and then you get paid for it. It's like, this is amazing. So, to answer your question, I wanted to be a radio announcer. Bad.
It's very interesting, I think, how your dad kind of dissuaded you, too.
Especially being so good. It's like Tom Brady telling his kid to go play baseball instead of football.
I know. But you definitely did inherit the skills, right? And you're using them now in a different way.
Well, thanks very much, and we'll be right back after these messages from your sponsors. But the thing about radio, like, I'm very grateful for how everything ended up, by the way, because if I'd been a chirping voice box in radio, you're basically told what you can and can't say. Right. I probably would have developed disciplines of just doing what I was told, which now I don't answer to anyone, and I'm self-employed, and I can talk about whatever's important to me, a lot of which would not fly on any commercial radio station at all.
Yeah. That's the beauty of podcasting, I think, is this revolution of being able to have free speech. And, that's amazing. I mean, you see a lot of guys coming out now, guys and girls, that are speaking the way that no news station, radio station, outlet would ever promote. But it's the truth to them, and that's how it should be. People should be able to, look at life through their lens and see other people's perspectives, because we live with the blinders on so much, and everybody is not as truthful as they seem.
Amen, brother. I'm a huge proponent of free speech. It's not something that you grow up having drilled into you as much as you do in the US, because New Zealand, up until pre-pandemic, was really a very easy going. There's a term in Australia called, this is like, she'll be right, mate. She'll be right.
Yeah.
And we never needed to worry about it so much. Now the country, New Zealand, has been one of the tightest when it comes to being able to speak freely, particularly around certain hot topics. And it's just mind-boggling to see such a wonderful country just completely flip on its head in the way that people have turned on each other. We need open dialogue to keep everyone honest. I have absolutely shared information that will, at one point in the future, if not already, come out as not being correct or accurate. All right, it's my truth in that moment, and it's put out with the best of intentions. But what I will do is I will admit fault. As I continue to learn and grow and do all this other stuff, I'll put my hand up and say, I made a mistake with that. They don't do that in the mainstream. Very, very rarely.
Right.
And I think it generates a lot of animosity, and I think that's why podcasting, as you say, has become huge. Like Joe Rogan's podcast, I believe, is popular than most of the news channels put together.
Oh, yes. The viewership per episode, I believe, is like ridiculous comparative to like a Fox or a CNN or whatever other news station. It's insane.
Yeah, like enough to affect an election.
Oh, 100%.
Right.
100%.
But the thing I love about Rogan is that, for the most part, I think he does a really great job of just allowing the people to talk, and it's not bleeped out, it's not censored for the most part. And his podcast directly affected my life in 2016 when I learned about my incurable autoimmune disease by one of the guests he had on, right? And then some other people that I've learned from, David Goggins, he's the motherfucker that got me ultra running.
Yes. So I want to touch on that.
Okay, shoot.
So your weight transformation, you mentioned with the two queens at that point, you were overweight and struggling, to live a healthy lifestyle. What really was the catalyst or tipping point for you to say, I need to get my ass in shape?
There was a series of transformations that took place from 2015. 2015 is when I hit rock bottom. I became a prolific gambler, and I was leaving work during the day. I worked in the city of Melbourne. I was gambling on horse racing, and I was losing money hand over fist. The bigger my bets got, the bigger the return would be, and then the bigger the next bet, and I would lose it, right? So I reached out for help and got access to the gambling helpline, which was funded by taxes from gambling losses. And they've got those in most modern countries in the world, from what I can tell. So if you've got an issue with that, like, that's a great place. We're someone who will talk to you without any judgment, which is what I experienced. And it gave me confidence to share. And I got access to a gambling psychologist for about a year and a half. And it was through that healing journey of sort of reverse engineering of what had happened to me. And for me, I was a child of divorce, right? It wasn't anything more innocuous that you should never compare yourself to anyone else apart from the person you were the day before, right? So my story might be mind-blowingly terrible for you. It might pale into comparison to what you went through. Don't compare yourself. Listen to this story like it's you, okay? And it was through that healing journey emotionally that I started wanting to get the physical side of things sorted, because it wasn't a weight thing for me. It was an autoimmune disease that I'd been dealing with for 17 years. As I fixed that, not surprisingly, after cutting grains out of my diet and gluten and stuff, I lost 3 kilos, which is like 2.2 pound and a kilo, by the way, of visceral fat just around my organs, verified through a DEXA scan. And I know your bachelor dude was talking about DEXA scans. Yeah. So it measures bone, fat, tissue, right? I lost 3 kilos, 7, 8, 9 pounds from just around my organs when I cut grains out. And so my body started to change shape. And like over the course of the 3 years, I lost 60 pounds of body fat and put on 30 pounds of muscle. No juice. I promise you I'm a natural athlete, right? Now, for those who don't know much about bodybuilding, to put on 30 pounds of muscle in 3 years at 37 years of age, as a runner, is impossible, right? It's because running's a catabolic exercise where it burns muscle. It makes sense when you look at what I was eating food-wise. But that was the transformation from a physical. So it was kind of accidental, but when you look really, if you start focusing on healing yourself mentally and emotionally and spiritually, it will be a natural byproduct, because things like overeating and eating shit food and all of that stuff is usually linked to escapism behavior, bad habits, and of course it's a lot easier to knock that stuff on the head when you're eating well.
Yeah, I think it's the point of starting, right? And I feel like for you, once you started, you realized you needed help, you got help. Other things started domino affecting because you had a mindset shift, and then you started seeing things different. The perspective changed, the way you were viewing life changed. And I feel like for a lot of people that feel trapped or are in that loop of escapism, it's so important to just start where your feet are. and try and fix that one thing, that one habit. I heard Hormozy say this too. I like it when people look at things from a different lens. And he was like, you don't need to be setting goals. You just need to be focusing on exactly what you're doing that day to create the habits that will lead to the goals, right? It's the habits, the daily actions. That's what the show's all about, though, too. You know, everyday action, extraordinary mindset. Because I would hear all these people talk about, you need to do this, you need to do that. This is a great biohack. This is a great tip. And it's like, all of this is great, but not if you aren't putting in the work and actually seeing the momentum that's coming from those daily habits.
Well, one of the things we spoke about earlier, right, was like it's harder for people in that middle ground of addiction to do something. Like I finally got to a point where I was in so much pain, emotionally, spiritually, and physically, I suppose, where I knew from when I was a 16-year-old boy to when I was 35 that what I was doing was way different to what I'd imagined for my life. And so for me, Mason, I was in a huge amount of pain. So that was my catalyst for doing, because the staying in what I was doing was so terrifying that whatever I was going to do different was a far better option no matter what it was. And so if you're at a moment in your life and if you really listen to yourself, right, spend some time alone, put TikTok down for a minute, put computer games down, and really pay attention, you'll think the same thing as well. You know what? What I'm destined to be doing on this planet is just not happening, and I've got to do something, because you will be unfulfilled until you follow that pathway, and you can cover it up with having all the fancy home and the wife and the kids and stuff, but you'll be fucking miserable. All right? And what's the point? What's the point of being here if you're just going to be miserable? My life, Mason, is not without challenges. Don't get me wrong. And you've heard the story about my wife and I. You know, collectively, her and I have had 16 consecutive miscarriages. 2 of those were ectopics. And we are pursuing outrageous things to try and help heal her body, which is from some botched surgery, right? Like this dry fasting stuff we're talking about. So that's given us incentive, because if we don't go through the pain of dry fasting, the alternative is we're not going to be able to procreate. Now, if the universe doesn't allow us to procreate, you know, in the natural way, then we'll figure out another way. But while we're still both, you know, I'm 42, but she's only 35. She's physically in pristine condition, but like we want to try and make the most of that while we've got that window.
Yeah.
It's motivated by pain. So try and find something that's causing you pain as your motivation. Because we're not supposed to be happy all the time. Right? Mm-hmm. We're not. But I tell you what I am. I'm fulfilled most of the time. Because even when life sucks and we've got $0 because 5 different people pulled out of deals, you know, we still pull off miracles, and our life is, I know, the envy of many people. And we're not doing it to try and make people jealous. It's just like, I just live in this, you know, I've got this purpose. I know that I'm on this planet to have an impact to people and to be known as the world's most positively influential speaker, right? By being the world's best courage coach.
Yeah.
Why would I aim for anything less than that?
Yeah. So many good things there. What really was the moment where you looked yourself in the mirror and said, I want to be the world's best courage coach, or I am the world's best courage coach? So the world's best courage coach came about in 2021. And I was still living in Melbourne. My wife had just gone back to Russia for some urgent family business. That's where she's from. And we'd been in lockdown for 296 days in Melbourne. It was the longest of anywhere in the world. Jeez.
And my entrepreneurial journey started the day we went into lockdown, because I was like, okay, well, and you're back. So I'd created the podcast. I'd written most of the book at that point, but like we were stuck in our homes for 23 hours a day for the most of that time, right?
Unbelievable.
And like I didn't qualify for any of the government payouts, because my previous 12 months had been running my own recruitment business, which is a total unmitigated financial disaster. And I'd been introduced to some people in the US who were executive coaches. And they told me about this video, which maybe you should put in the show notes for people to watch. And it's Steve Hardison, who's known as the ultimate coach, talking about TBO, LIT, NFL, the best defensive linebacker in the NFL. And it's not about football. If you're a woman and you're not interested in football, or a man not interested in football, it's absolutely worth watching, because it's not about football. It's about someone who's involved in that space, right? Deuce Latouille. And the power of being and declaration. And it's 2 hours and 10 minutes long, Mason, and it absolutely changed my DNA. It was that good. Like, if you're in this space of professional personal development, you're a coach or you're a speaker, and like, you need to watch. If you're spiritually aligned, you need to watch this thing, right? Because if you get 1% of what I got from it, it's game-changing stuff. Steve Hardison is this 67-year-old devout Mormon who lives in Mesa, Arizona, who's known as the ultimate coach. And up until 18 months ago, this guy didn't exist anywhere on the internet apart from that one video. He's $200,000 for 50 hours if you want to coach with him. He used to coach people like Oprah Winfrey's coach, Yana Van Zant, her name. Heaps of billionaires. Becky Robbins, who's Tony Robbins' ex-wife. Like, OG. And people compare him to the modern-day version of Jesus Christ, right? In a non-blasphemous kind of way. He is the epitome of love. And I was like, I need to speak to this man to see if what he's like in this video he is in real life. And I was always known for my resourcefulness. And I got his phone number and I called this guy. He picks up the phone and I said, Steve Hardison? He goes, yes, it is. And I said, it's Laban Ditchburn from Melbourne, Australia. He goes, Laban, so great to hear from you. I've been waiting for this call all my life. And I was like, who's this guy? This is amazing. I said, Steve, I just watched this video. It changed my life. And I wanted to see if you were the real deal. And I just wanted to ask you one very specific question. Because I knew this guy was incredibly wealthy. I knew this guy had an amazing relationship with his wife. I also knew that he refused to do podcast interviews and interviews in general. In fact, he turned down being on the Oprah Winfrey show at least 4 or 5 times.
Jeez.
Right? He just was in his zone. He just didn't want to be known in that way. And he said, sure, Len, what's that? I said, what do you need help with, Steve? Because that's all I could offer him. That's all I had. He goes, oh, man, I want to acknowledge you for asking me that question. He said, you know what? I'm 67. I'm 8% body fat. I do 10-mile walks a day. I got everything a man could ever want, but I want to thank you for asking me that question. I said, oh, no worries, Steve. I said, are you still not doing podcast interviews? He goes, that's right. I said, oh, look, that's cool. I said, the reason I ask is I'm a speaker, I'm a coach, and I've got this amazing podcast called Become Your Own Superhero, and I'm well on my way to being known as the world's most positively influential speaker. But someone that I spoke to recently actually said to me, there's too much ego associated with that statement. And Steve goes, the devout Mormon that he is, Laban, you tell that person to fuck off. Do you know who I am? I'm like, I'm all evangelical at this point, right? I'm like, who are you, Steve? He goes, I'm the best coach in the world. And Mason, the way he said that had zero ego in it, nothing. And I was like, wow. Like, it was the most powerful declaration of anything I've ever experienced in my life. Him and I had 13 minutes on that phone call. And I got off the call and I rang a friend of mine, this guy Chris Doris, who's known as the mental toughness coach. He's worked with PGA golfers, NFL, works with Salesforce as their head trainer, makes a couple of $1 million a year. And he's been coached by Steve Hardison. I developed this friendship with him over a couple of months. And I rang him up and I said, hey, I just got on the phone to Steve Hardison. He goes, what? I go, yeah, I was just chatting to Steve for like 15 minutes. He goes, what do you mean? I said, I was just chatting to Steve. And we had this great conversation. He goes, do you have any idea of the gift of courage you have to bring to the world? And in that moment, the world's best courage coach was created. Now, I said Anna was in Russia. I was trying to get out of the country as well. We needed money. And I said to Chris, dude, I'm fucking strapped here. Like, what the fuck am I going to do? He goes, here's what we're going to do. Him and I spent 4 hours. He's $3,000 an hour if you want to hire him one-on-one, right? This is all for free. And we came up with this declaration of the world's best courage coach and a script that I could read when I rang the biggest companies on planet Earth. So I started calling these companies in the US, and I spoke to Eric Yang, who's the CEO of Zoom, for about 60 seconds, and he was on his car. His English isn't great, and there was poor reception, and that kind of dropped off. Called some people from like Amazon and Walmart and stuff, and couldn't get through to them. It was getting late in the US, and I started ringing companies in Australia, right? And I rang this Hodges Real Estate, which in Australia is the oldest real estate firm in the country. And I had the cell phone of this guy. He picks up the phone. He says, "Hi, Tony speaking." I said, "Tony Zaka?" He said, "Yes, it is." I said, "Tony Zaka, it's Laban Ditchburn from Melbourne here." He goes, "Oh, hi, Laban. Do we know each other?" Because he was such confidence coming through in my voice, right? I said, "No, we don't. No, you don't, Tony." I said, "But today's your lucky day." He laughs. He goes, "Why is it my lucky day, Laban?" I said, "Because, Tony, I'm the world's best courage coach. And I teach your people how to take bold, massive, and courageous action to facilitate their own miraculous outcomes." He invited me back 7 days later to present training and coaching to his business. And him and I had a 90-minute phone call the following Wednesday that started off with me asking him one very specific question. And I said, "What do you want to do with this company, Tony?" No pitch deck, no references. My website wasn't even really operating at that point. It was simply the power of which came through with my voice, right? And Steve Hardison talks about the power being in the listener. Charisma is being a powerful listener, by the way. You want to become more charismatic? Learn how to listen. And so I listened for 45 minutes straight while Tony told me everything I needed to know about how I could serve these guys. And I listened with the patience of a saint, let him finish, and I said, "Tony, what about being the best real estate company in the state of Victoria?" And he looked up and left and started sort of nodding subconsciously. He's like, "Yeah." And I said, "What about being the best real estate company in Australia?" Now he's really getting into it. And I said, "Tony, you do realise that in order for you to have the best real estate company in Australia, you need to be the best real estate CEO in Australia." 30 seconds later, I had Tony Zaka standing full stretch in his office in his house, yelling at the top of his lungs, "I'm the best real estate CEO in the world!" And it completely changed my life in the process and destroyed the glass ceiling of limiting beliefs that existed in my own mind. Now, I pitched $250,000 worth of training and coaching to this organisation on that call, right? This is the second call, no pitch deck, no introduction, no referrals, nothing. And he didn't laugh me out of there. He didn't tell me to F off. He didn't hang up the call. He just simply stared back at me in all sincerity, said, "Laban," he said, "I physically do not have the liquid to invest in that right now, but let me see what I can do," right? And I got off that call, Mason, having had my first ever experience as the world's best courage coach, and I witnessed the power of making a declaration of how I show up in the world. And my encouragement to the audience, anyone listening here, is that we can all be the best in the world in our chosen niche, all right? It's better if it's non-quantifiable and intangible, right? So unless they have a world's best courage coach competition held out of Las Vegas, Nevada next year, right, I can't have that taken away from me. It's not inextricably linked to what I do, the podcast, the book, the speaking, the mastermind, whatever. And it's simply a way for me to wake up every single morning and go, "All right, Ditchburn, how would the world's best courage coach conduct himself?" And then so you have this perpetual forward momentum of how you operate and how you show up in life. Is that the behavior of the world's best courage coach, right? Am I perfect at it? No. Am I a million times more impactful than I was 2 years ago? Yes. And it also gives people clarity when we're at an event or a barbecue or at a bar or whatever. And they're like, "Hey, Laban, nice to meet you. What do you do?" "I'm the world's best courage coach." 9 times out of 10, they go, "Wow, what does that look like?" And I go, I teach people how to take bold, massive, and courageous action to facilitate their own miraculous outcomes. And I do that by being a speaker, a coach, a podcaster, and a yada, yada. Insert whatever your thing is there, right? And so we created this mastermind, which we're so grateful to have you as a member of, World's Best Alpha Coach. And it's really totally shifted my being in the process. And, Tony we never went through with any training and coaching. They needed a lot of help with what they wanted, and they were going to have to pay for it. And but that experience, they didn't need to buy it, because it shifted my whole being, and it's led to countless other business opportunities for people that are a bit further along in their healing journey. So that's how the World's Best Courage Coach came about.
It's incredible. And if I'm not mistaken, that exact skill that you really just decided to jump into in a short period of time that changed your life, then also helped lead to you writing your first book with a foreword from Les Brown.
Well, yes and no. The majority of the book was written by the time that declaration came out. The book came out late last year, 2020, into 2022 yep. rather. No, into 2021. It's that period of the new year that I've got to keep an eye on. But the behaviours were exemplified from the get-go. In May 2020, I reached out when I had 10 subscribers on my podcast and managed to pull Les Brown on my show, who then ended up writing the foreword for my book and has become a dear friend ever since. So it's awesome.
Yeah. It's the patterns, it's the action that you took, to me. And I think it's a testament and encouragement to anybody listening as well, that so much can change in a very short period of time with intention and with courage. Now, that's my word for the year, is intention. Because I feel like so often it's easy to be, have your head in the clouds, not really be present, be thinking in the past or the future or what ifs. And there's so much beauty in now in being, very specific and having intention in what you're doing in your relationships and your businesses, in, your workouts and whatever that is for you. So I think the intention that you brought, it's crazy what happens when you align yourself with that intention, with your purpose, and the things that fall into place afterwards.
Well, dude, I tell you, like, if you look at like a graph of how I've gotten to where I am now, it's ugly. It's ugly. There's a lot up and down, right? It's not linear at all. But I don't think it matters, because I'm here, right? And it's like when the why becomes clear, the how becomes easy, right? A famous quote from Keith Abraham, who's a transformational speaker and an author out of Australia. When the why becomes clear, the how becomes easy. I know what my why is, so I don't need to worry about the logistics. Sure, it's ugly AF, some of the stuff, but it doesn't matter. And like, we're talking about Joe Rogan, like, I thought it would be a good idea to throw my book at Joe Rogan when we were staying in Austin last year, and ended up having the opportunity to throw it directly to him on his jetty, on his dock, whatever you guys call it. How would the world's best courage coach conduct himself? It's like you don't get to rest on your laurels. And I want to be a leader that has credibility by leading by example, right? I don't want to do as I say, not as I do. I just don't resonate with that at all. I don't think anyone should.
Yeah. I'm sure through those ups and downs, you've had a lot of pain, and you talked about the escapism of the substance abuse or the gambling, and really trying to fill that void that you were feeling in your life at that time. But now that you've really kind of found your identity, you mentioned ultra being a part of leaning into that pain and it being a different kind of high for you. What got you into that, and what was your first experience like with a ultra marathon?
It's a fascinating world, dude, I tell you. In May of 2018, I went from running 3 miles, was my longest ever run that I could do before I'd conk out. I went from running 3 miles to 26.2 miles in 14 days in May, after having an emotional breakthrough a week earlier with my mum, and involving a lot of forgiveness and a huge emotional release, which I don't know, thinking about it now, must have released a lot of tension in my body physically, which allowed me to keep running like that. I ran a 3-hour 56 marathon. And when I finished it, I went out on a date that night. This is before I met my wife. And when I got home from the date, I signed up for a 100-kilometre or a 60-mile ultra marathon that was about 12 weeks after that.
That must have been an incredible date.
Dude, I was a dating machine. My wife's not home at the moment. Well, she knows all my stuff anyway, but I was probably going on 3 dates a week. And I did have a caveat with this girl. I was like, I'm going to be running a marathon. I don't know how I'm going to feel. But anyway, did that, and I just physically was able to pull it off. And I'd been inspired by David Goggins, and I had a lot of emotional release when I was running. I used to burst into tears of joy at about the 8-mile mark for about 2 years. Wow. I know, right? And I've been asking a lot of spiritual healers and a lot of shamans, a lot of medical people that I've had on my own podcast to try and explain what's going on. The closest I can get is my own guess. We all know that trauma is stored in the body, right? Mm-hmm. Fat stores toxins, right? I was on a pretty ketogenic diet. I went from like 14.4% body fat to 8.4% in 3.5 weeks during that period. And I can only hypothesize that the stored trauma in my fat cells was being released as I was burning them when I was running. Right? Wouldn't that be a fascinating university study to conduct? And because it doesn't happen anymore. I don't cry. I don't feel the need to cry. It's not that I'm bottling stuff up. All that emotion's just been released. It's fascinating, dude.
Oh man, yeah, that's a whole podcast in itself, and I'm gonna write it down now just because I want to do research on if there has been any clinically proven studies on that, because I've heard so much about memories being stored in tissues, and like when people have heart transplants and having like weird dreams about like the other person's life, like things like that are stored in our cells and our DNA. It's so fascinating. I think it's crazy. Like, we haven't even barely touched the tip of the iceberg of what's humanly possible for us to understand about our own biology and neurology and our brain, the way we operate. And it's just so fascinating to me. And, personally, why I think, I believe in God. Like, how can you look at this human body and the structure of, what we're physically capable of, and like to even heal ourselves? You talk about like Dr. Joe Dispenza and so much of the science that he's done as well, like healing through thought. It's just incredible, some of the things that the body is capable of.
Amen, dude. Well, I ran a 30-miler in July 2021 back in Australia on 0 sugar.
Wow.
Right? Like no carbohydrate.
No glucose at all, yeah.
Nothing. I had ribeye, homemade bone broth, and cheese. And it wasn't a super fast run, but I did it in like 6 hours 30 or something. Like 30 miles, like on no sugar. Like, shouldn't you be dead? And it's just like it's not that I'm trying to do this stuff to prove a point. I'm like, I feel like I've been lied to about most things in my life, especially what's spewed forth from mainstream. And it's like, I want to figure out for myself what's real and what's not. I believe in God as well, dude. I met my creator on a plant medicine journey last year, or whatever my creator gave for me to see. And it was so overwhelmingly powerful that it literally took my breath away. Like physically, my breath was removed. Like... And then I was just overwhelmed with love. And I had like 4 of these particular journeys. Like we are not a mistake. We're not a big bang thingy. You can bury your head in the sand. And it's funny, most of the people that are the most miserable are godless with whatever your God is, right? Like, yeah. I don't identify as religious in any capacity. I'm a very spiritual guy.
Yeah.
And the body, it's all energy and vibration and quantum mechanics and all the other big names that are being thrown out. It's like we have no clue really what's going on. So I'm just going to keep pushing it and just see what I can pull off while I'm here on this planet.
Yeah. All I know is that, we have one meat carcass that we're capable of affecting the, relationship that we have with this earth and with our own spirituality and, with our soul. And I think it's, it directly correlates to how good that life is that you live by taking care of that body. And we aren't the body, but, it's a transportation method for us to experience a lot of things at a lot higher quality than if we weren't taking care of it. I mean, just by changing your food, the way that you ate, I mean, I'm sure that for cognition, for, your sex life, all of those things, it was just probably a dramatic increase that you've seen.
Well, that was one, you just reminded me of something that I wanted to make a highlighted point on, is that as I started that healing journey and continued on that healing journey, my connection with Source improved infinitely higher. My levels of intuition now are becoming ridiculous, right? And it's getting to the point where I will think of someone and I'm getting a text message from them 5 times a week.
So weird.
Right? Like some people have it once a year, twice a year. Like it's just like I will now think of someone to try and get them to call me. Do you know what I mean? It's crazy, man. It's crazy. And the more, when you're interviewing the Bachelor guy, you're talking about like when you're eating shitty food, it makes you sluggish and slow down. Like that's exactly what happens when I do it as well. My connection with Source becomes disconnected. And I love that feeling of being dialed in, tuned in, and like Bradley Cooper and Limitless. Like that's how I feel most of the time, right?
Yes, it's amazing. And I had a moment where, I had cut out everything and I went, you hear this quote like monk mode, right? And I had done it for a while. And I had this just moment of like pure it's just joy. It was joy. It was joy in a way that I hadn't felt it before, and I felt like it was because I finally had let go of what I thought I should be, and I felt like I was being led by something greater, and I was listening to it. And it just felt joy. It felt alignment. That was the best way I could describe it, was alignment. And I think at that point, I had been a little bit into this journey with the show, but at that point I was like, I want everybody to be able to feel this. And if they decide to leave it, fine. But I guarantee you, like 9.9 out of 10 people are going to be like, "Wow, this is amazing!" And you can't forget that feeling. And I think once you find that, and then you start tilting off, you feel so out of whack. Like you said, your connection with Source is gone, and so it becomes a lifestyle at that point because you want to feel your best and you want to be able to achieve what you're capable of.
Amen, brother. Amen. And to witness your journey, it's been so impressive. And just at the age that you are, where a lot of people are in full-blown party mode, self-indulgent, focused on themselves, it's rare and it's inspiring because you'll attract a whole another generation of people to inspire and empower. And if you're listening to this and you're a fan of what Mason does, go and give this a review and go and share this around, because the only way that growth happens is if you give this to people that you really care about and they'll listen to it too. All right? Like, if you jump on mainstream TV, you'll never find this kind of content available because it's just designed to numb you out. Whereas if people paid attention to all the free information that's in these podcasts, like your life will infinitely be better.
Yeah. I can tell you my life has infinitely been better from meeting people like you and just, being okay, with putting yourself out there. I feel like I had this like self-identity, this mask that I wore. And while it's given me so many things, it wasn't fully who I was to the core, right? Because I did all the self-indulgence. Shoot, I still make mistakes all the time, right? But I felt like once I started healing with myself and realizing that it's okay to put yourself out there, be vulnerable, speak your truth. Like so many people, the way I viewed the world and the things that started happening were pretty amazing.
and you're just getting started, baby. You're just getting
We
started.
just getting started. But I do kind of want to talk about the dating piece, because you were quite the online dating kingpin guru back in the day. And I think the dates, the dating apps and those things are very prominent today too. What is your take on dating apps and kind of the way that we're seeing, I guess, mainstream dating today?
Look, all I can comment on really is my experience, because I know, without even being on the apps, that the world has shifted, right? The political, the health freedom, polarization of trying to find a partner now. If you're a young, average-looking single guy, it's a nightmare, right? In the same way it probably is for women as well. But I grew up as the son of a very weak man, and my father had no game, but he was a successful broadcaster. And so my mum was a beautiful woman, but crazy, like on that crazy hot scale, like she was like, remember that she was right up there. And so the only reason I bring that up, I had no role models. Like I didn't know about how to lean into my masculinity and lead in a relationship. And for years I wanted to marry a rich woman so I could get out of my debt. Like, it makes me sick thinking about it, right? But I remember getting into the game early on. I didn't agree with the way the negging and that kind of stuff never resonated with me. Then I got onto a guy called Corey Wayne, How to Be a 3% Man. And if you read my book, the Kindle or the paperback versions, you'll see my recommended reading. And I think I talk about these books in there. And it kind of opened my eyes to this whole pickup community. And then I realized it was all about improving myself rather than trying to woo or convince people to like me. And I was always a pretty charismatic dude, and I was a pretty fun drunk, but I hooked up with lots and lots of very mediocre partners. Yeah. Like, if I was sober, the numbers would be way less. And I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think that's a good... I would have rather met someone like my smoking hot Russian-Japanese blend wife when I was in my mid-20s, you know what I mean, rather than going through all the pain. But I got really good at it. When I'm interested in something, I will become a ferocious learner. And so I went on, I think it was 150 first dates over 2 years. And at one point I was going on like 2 or 3 a week. Like I was burning myself out.
We need a Netflix documentary.
Right? But I also quit alcohol halfway through.
Oh, wow.
And so I was dating stone cold sober, which is a really interesting experience. And I got very good at it. And I'm not saying this to brag, but like at one point it was ridiculous. I was going home with these girls on first dates probably 95% of the time. It was like, what is happening? And a lot of them were attractive women, right? But it wasn't fulfilling. And then I realized something. I was like, oh, fuck, I've just gotten addicted to sex. Like, I've just given up booze and drugs and gambling. And here I am, like, I'm addicted to sex and this, the feeling that you get when you've conquered that.
Yes.
But I got very good on the dating apps. Bumble and Tinder were the two things that I used back in the day. But it was when I made the decision in 2018, I think it was like March or April, to like delete them. Because I knew that the woman, for me, that I was going to meet wasn't going to be on a dating app, right? I just intuitively knew. I just knew it. And I was like, okay, fuck, well, if that's the case, then I may as well get off them. And then lo and behold, I bump into my now wife in September of 2018 on the streets of Melbourne. Stone cold sober again, because I've got practice. And I summon the courage of 1,000 Spartan warriors, and I walk up to her and I say, excuse me, but you are stunning. And I wondered if you'd have a drink with me one time. She's like, you look good too. And the rest is history. It's the greatest love story ever. Yeah. But it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't gone through that process. So you'll need to figure out what's going to be a vehicle for you, even if it's only a temporary thing. But dating now seems like a fucking minefield. Oh my God, Father!
I think we were talking about that the other day. I was like, man, yeah, it's a war zone out here.
It's like, are you vaxxed? What are your political persuasions? What are your thoughts on the Ukraine? It's like
Check please. Check please.
But to women's defense, like men, the reason that men are like they are is because of broken homes, right? Divorce is a hell of a drug, and we need our men to reclaim their masculinity and to learn how to function at an evolutionary level, look after themselves, become empowered, and my wife and I have this wonderful monogamous relationship. I'm not out there, with a harem of women. And here's the brutal honesty, right? Like, we've been together 4.5 years. If I do attract other women, but I don't put a vibe out there, so it doesn't happen very often. But I often wonder, what would it be like to have a third person, to have a woman? And so because I created a foundation of trust with Anna, there was a book that I read called Models by Mark Manson, Attracting Women Through Honesty. I read that in 2017. It was about just being honest. And because I always said to Anna, you can ask me anything you want as long as you're happy to hear the answer. And boy, did she ask me. So I had to tell her. And there was some humbling stuff there, right? But that honesty has flowed forth into the relationship. So we've got this layer of trust. So I can talk to her and say, babe, I'm thinking about, like, what would it be like to bring a woman into the relationship, right?
Yep.
And we can talk about it. And by the end of it, this has happened a few times, I'm like, do you know what? I don't know if I want it that bad. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, and the thought diminishes. So I don't spend any more time fantasizing about something that I don't even want. She's not feeling any pressure for anything, because if I request that, she's well within her rights to request a dude, and I just don't want that. I don't want that, right? I'm not into cuckold, and it was kind of being half funny, but like deadly serious in the same manner. And this allows Anna and I to have a really wonderful, powerful relationship based on trust. Yes. That's what you want to develop as a man, I believe.
Yeah.
Women are inherently pretty honest anyway, I think.
Yeah.
Men, we talk out our asses to try and get laid.
Yeah, I mean, everything's built on truth and trust, I think. That's the biggest thing. Definitely a mistake I made a lot, but I think once that trust is broken, it's really hard to put it back together, and when you do, it's never really the same. So I just think, it's so important. It's so important. And that goes back to, I think, trying to be something that you're not, because you're not comfortable with even telling yourself the truth, so you're not going to tell other people the truth. I feel like it's often a reflection of, your self-worth and the relationship you have internally.
100,000%. If you read my book, bet on you.
And we need to read the book. Where's it at? I'm going to put this in the middle of the show, too. They're going to get like 70 ads on this. Go get the book. Go get the book. Go get the book.
Well, I'm so passionate about it because you'll see what I mean. Like, I just reveal everything in all its glory because I don't care, right? Like, I don't care, and it's important for me as part of my healing journey to verbalize stuff. I don't operate in victim mode. I'm not saying woe is me. Yeah. I'm like, okay, I did this. Here's what I did. Like, it's not so bad, by the way. It's always, and like Seneca says, it's always worse in your head than it is in real life.
Yes.
But the book I'm so proud of. It's on Amazon. You might need to search "Bet on You, Laban, Ditchburn," and it's got this cool cartoon cover of me as a superhero on there, and it's on Audible in my dulcet tones, if you like this accent, which is about a 4-hour listen. It's actually 3 hours 56 long, which is how long my marathon took, and it was a complete coincidence.
Ooh, that's sweet.
I don't know if that means something. Probably not.
I'm thinking about, I was thinking about 23, some health goals that I wanted, because I kind of broke down goals and categories, and I was like, I hate running, and I think I'm going to go do an Olympic triathlon this year. I think, yeah.
Ooh,
I want to do it, man, and now I can't stop thinking about it. So,
do you want some advice?
There's one in
Do you want some advice?
Yeah.
This is for anyone listening as well. If you set a goal like this, here's what you do. You get your credit card out, you get on it online, and you search for the next available event of the thing you want to do. And you book it and fucking pay for it, bitch.
Yeah.
All right? And then you reverse engineer how you want to do it. Because when the why becomes clear, the how will become easy. I used to hate running with a passion, all right? But then I got so good at it, like running became this therapy. And I'm heavier now than I was at my peak running weight, but like running is one of the most cathartic things you can do. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's just my 2 cents.
I agree. There's a threshold that you have to get past, like anything, right? It's like once you get past it and you start settling into it and you get in that flow, it's like weightless. It's pretty amazing feeling.
Well, from a practical point of view, get rid of refined carbs. Get rid of seed oils.
Yes.
Because you will remove a lot of inflammation from your body, which is where joint pain comes from. Your knees aren't wearing out. It's because you're inflamed. And if you really want to know how inflamed you are, get a C-reactive protein score from your GP. Find a GP that will actually, it's a simple test. And if you've got anything above about 1, it means you've got some low-grade systemic inflammation. If it's higher than that, you've probably got a few months to live.
Really?
Oh, I'm slightly exaggerating, but...
See, I think that's one of the things from the carnivore diet that I've heard is from everybody who's done it, their inflammation went down incredibly.
Well, I can tell you I got a 0.3 on my C-reactive protein last test I got, which is negligible, by the way. I can show you. I've been tracking my blood work for a decade now. My triglyceride HDL ratio was 4.4, which is so good that my GP back in Melbourne high-fived me as the healthiest patient she'd ever had. I got the heart scan. What's it called? It'll come to me in a minute. But like testosterone all went up.
Yeah.
Put on all that. Like libido was flying. And if you're putting on muscle mass like that, like 30 pounds in 3 years, where I was, now I wasn't just running. So just for full transparency,
Yeah.
I was doing body weight exercises 3 times a week, and I was doing boxing training on a Saturday for the majority of that time. So, but it was the sheer amount of protein and fat that I was eating. I was just eating for satiety, and my body was healing after being abused for a long time. What's the name of the heart scan you can get? It's like the Widowmaker heart attack that kills healthy people, and you can get a scan.
Yeah, it's the one. My dad had that. He had a heart attack last year, and it's the one aorta, and it's the one specific valve. There's 2 of them, but it's the one that they call the Widowmaker.
Yeah, there's a guy on YouTube called Ivor Cummins. He's an Irish guy. Ivor Cummins, check him out. And there's a movie based on that Widowmaker stuff, and I can't believe I forgot the name. But the test will tell you whether you've got any calcified atherosclerotic buildup.
Oh, wow.
It won't tell you whether you've got any. Now, I'm very young, but if you check this stuff with relative regularity, you know, a friend of mine, Niall Clerkin, who's only 6 years older than me, fit as a fiddle, 2.5 years ago, had a heart attack on a run, and because he'd been a heavy smoker and a drinker, but he'd always been lean. He was tofu, thin on the outside, fat on the inside. And even though he'd got his health sorted, he'd done damage because he was predisposed genetically to having that stuff. So there's a number of things you can do to just check on your body. But I'm fascinated by this stuff, and apologies if I'm being too intense, but I'm just downloading. I've read over 600 books in the last 5 years, and thousands of hours of podcast interviews and other articles and stuff. So you get a good feel for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's amazing. You and I are very similar in that the human body is an amazing thing, an amazing vehicle for you to take advantage of and use for, your own pleasure, and use it for what it can do. It's amazing. Goggins called it the 40%, right? Our body tells us, or our mind tells our body to stop at 40% when the body really has another 60 in it. Isn't that true?
Yep. I've just started listening to his second book today. About an hour in, just getting warmed up.
Where can everybody find you on social, on all that good stuff?
Best place will be labanditchburn.com. Just go to the website, find your favourite social media platform. I'm on most of them now before I get kicked off some of the other ones. The podcast, the book's all on Amazon. Podcast is on YouTube and on all the major podcast platforms as well. So, yeah, I appreciate this, dude. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was great. There's one question I always love to end with, and that is, what is your definition of success?
I never got to the end of your other podcast to learn to prepare for that one.
I'll save it for the special guest.
For me, right? For me, my definition of success is living in purpose, right? Being able to figure out what you are here to do, and to show the balls to go and do it, male or female. Because success, like I'm early on in my entrepreneurial journey, all right? I'm still figuring out the financial things, but I tell you one thing right now, Mason. Because of all the other things that I have in my life, once the money's sorted, I'm the triple threat, because I got the health, wealth, and the relationships. That and most people don't. They don't, right? And that might change in the future, but I don't think so. So once that's sorted, bro, like, it's all about service. It's all about being able to share this message with people that want to hear it, that want to benefit from this, that want help. Unrequited help is no bueno. It's no good. Yep. There's plenty of people that do want help, though.
Absolutely.
And that's what I want to do.
Amazing. I can tell you have the most important two of those three. So it'll come. I know it will. And I'm excited to see the journey that it takes to get there. And I'll be like, yeah, we talked about it. We knew it was going to happen. It's just a matter of time.
Well, I did. And I'm not saying this to blow smoke either. Like, I think there's no way that you can fail. There's no way that you can fail given the trajectory you're on. You become like the books that you read and the people you spend the time around. And, you know, you got a 15-year head start on me, which is awesome.
Well, I appreciate, being a part of the mastermind, obviously meeting you, meeting everybody, and I'm excited. I know it's not going to end when the time with the mastermind does. It's going to continue on until we're probably in a box. So you're stuck with me now.
Well, there's something that we need to have a conversation with about the mastermind that you're going to be very excited to hear about.
Good.
Very, very excited.
Well, we'll take that offline. But everybody, this has been the incredible Laban Ditchburn, the world's best courage coach. Go check out the book. Go listen to this incredible voice for the next 3.5 hours on the audio version. And go find him at labanditchburn.com, correct?
There's only literally one Laban Ditchburn on the planet, as far as I can tell. You can't fuck it up.
And there's two people that are wearing, no shirt with the tux on top. And I'm kind of vibing with it.
Dude, honestly, you have to keep it. It looks so good. Yeah. Ladies and men that are attracted to men, leave comments. Leave comments. Even men that are attracted to women, leave comments of what you think. World's best alpha coach, Mason Benigo. I think it's going to stay, dude.
It's going to stay. Well, thank you so much, Laban. Guys, you guys know the price of admission. Go share this with somebody that you think could benefit from it, and then go leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. Reach out to me and Laban on Instagram or wherever else. We'd love to hear your feedback and questions. And as always, have a great rest of the week.